Formula One cheating. Relax, you've already seen this video. It's just that this is the continuation. In fact, if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. But you can watch this one first, no problem at all. Some say that cheating is only cheating when it's caught, and that in high-performance sports, exploring the edges of the law is something that needs to be done to reach the top. And in Formula One, there are many examples. In the first video, we talked about 10, and today we have 10 more. But after all, what is cheating? What is the difference between what appears in this video and what comes in our other famous series, Gadget? Well, come with me and you'll understand. The basic difference between what we include in the cheating series and what we discuss in Gadget is that, to make it into our hall of cheats, it must be clear, proven, evident that there was an intention to circumvent the rules. Because in Gadget, we've seen plenty, and we're even moving on to the third installment, things that were done because they weren't prohibited, like, I don't know, the six-wheeled car, the Brabham with a fan, brake steer, the so-called differential brake, and so on. It wasn't prohibited, so it was allowed. But the things we talk about in this video here were prohibited. And you, I bet, will have fun watching each one of them. Let's go. Movable aerodynamic devices until the end of the 2025 season are strictly prohibited in Formula One, except for the DRS. That's why there's so much discussion regarding flexible wings, which are movable but not movable by the definition of the term. After all, they don't have any device that causes the movement, but they bend under aerodynamic pressure. Why am I saying this? Because in 2007, Ferrari came up with a very hard to detect movable aerodynamic device, the floor. It all started when Ron Dennis, head of McLaren, who incidentally had copied Ferrari's car and perhaps was unaware of this contraption, said, without naming names in the press, that some teams were exploiting the regulations with interpretations that his team did not agree with. Although he did not specifically name Ferrari or say what it was about, sources later revealed to the international press that McLaren's concern was with Ferrari's movable floor at the front. The regulations at the time stated that no part of the floor could move more than 5 millimeters when subjected to an upward force of 500 newtons. However, Ferrari had cleverly placed a piston under the part designed to withstand exactly 500 newtons. And in addition, it allowed the floor to deform. This potentially allowed the floor to lift and let more air pass underneath, improving the downforce. And McLaren would have found out about this just before the season started at Albert Park, due to some rumors also involving the BMW Sauber cars. Paddy Lowe, at that time, coming from Williams and working for Ron Dennis, sent a letter to the FIA with the inquiry, "We would like to consider installing a mechanism at the front part of our floor, consisting of springs and pivots, and through this we would be able to control the flexibility of the floor to meet the tests specified by the FIA, but still allow greater flexibility under higher loads thanks to A's nonlinear characteristic." Lowe's intention was to do exactly what Red Bull did with Ferrari in 2019, the story of the illegal engine, remember that? You can watch it later. Poking the FIA with these cards and forcing it to close the loopholes in the regulations. McLaren didn't want to do anything. They actually wanted to corner Ferrari, and the FIA then, through its technical delegate at the time, Charlie Whiting, had to respond. And when they responded, they had to respond with a technical directive, changing the load test, which quickly ended Ferrari's party, but it opens up the famous discussion, there's nothing written in the rule about what the spirit of the rule wants. Due to some tricks we've already discussed here about cooling and refrigeration liquids being involved in the story of water tanks, from the first edition of Cheats, the FIA had already prohibited in 1984 that cars receive water in any type of reservoir after the race. Don't know what I'm talking about? Watch the video later and you'll understand the workaround they did. At the time, Tyrrell was the only team still using a naturally aspirated Cosworth engine against a squadron of turbo engines on the grid. Keep this information in mind. Ken's team came up with a very clever workaround. During a pit stop at the end of the race, the famous splash and go, Tyrrell filled Martin Brundle's car tank with 140 pounds, roughly 63 kilograms, of a solution containing water and lead pellets, little lead balls. And then, after Martin Brundle's brilliant second place on the streets of Detroit, the FIA said, "Let me take a look at that car." And during the inspection, they noticed traces of something very strange in that water. The trickery had layers. First of all, if it was forbidden to fill the car with water at the end, they would stop before the end. And then, it's not over, I do whatever I want. Second, with 63 kilos of water with lead, you have to agree with me. The car was running well below the minimum weight the entire race, which obviously translated into performance. The result was that when the FIA found out, they banned Tyrrell from the rest of that entire season. What some say was the beginning of the end for the team, and from there, they would never recover financially. The points also earned up to that point were deleted, and Tyrrell ended up with 0. But remember when I talked about the turbo engine story? So Martin Brundle still says today that it was actually a way to undermine Tyrrell and force them to abandon naturally aspirated engines to have a grid that was 100% turbo engines. And that during the inspection in which they were caught, no one else could see what was happening with the car. Blah, 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 yada, 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 all that stuff. I don't know. You choose who to believe. In 2005, Bar, by then already with factory support from Honda and about to officially become Honda, was a team to be taken seriously, very seriously. They had given a hard time with Jenson Button in 2004, but then all the performance from that year and the previous one was put under suspicion because no one knew for sure, since when they had been using a more than illegal contraption, the secret fuel tank. The device was filled with gasoline without the FIA knowing it existed, and the car was weighed without fuel in the actual tank. But there was fuel in a hidden tank that would later be burned. So you already understand where we're going with this, right? At some point during the race, the car would be below the minimum weight in an era of refueling. This meant it was a major cheat because everyone runs much lighter when they can refuel. You don't need to start and finish the race with the same fuel, right? Exactly. And when the FIA found out, the initial idea was to ban the team for the entire 2005 season. It ended up being lenient, with a ban for only 2 races. The 2006 Formula One season was memorable. Schumacher from Ferrari and Alonso from Renault competed point by point, race by race, victory by victory, until the end in a great duel. And in a great duel, clever drivers, sometimes too clever, try to exploit that extra something. Qualifying, as we know in Monaco, is crucial for the race result on Sunday. And then Michael Schumacher decided to set the best time and found a way to prevent his opponent from beating it. Alonso was on a fast lap with Schumacher, about to head to the pits, but then he intentionally lost control of the car at La Rascas and avoided a head-on crash into the wall. But then a yellow flag came out and no one else could set a fast time, especially since it was impossible to go fast there with the car blocking the middle of the track. As a result, no one bought into the German's trickery. His pole position was annulled and he had to start from the back. In the race, Schumacher still managed to climb through the field and finish in 5th position, but Alonso won, and thus the crime did not pay off. Very similar to Schumacher competing with Alonso in 2006, that's what happened in the qualifying, also with Nico Rosberg fighting in a Mercedes against Lewis Hamilton. The situation was very similar, both competing for the pole, and we know that pole position is crucial for victory in the Principality. And then, already having the best lap, with Hamilton coming behind to do his, Rosberg made a harmless lockup and went straight at the Mirabeau turn. And then he went into the escape area. Yellow flag. Anyone coming to set a lap? must necessarily slow down. It doesn't count anymore. Hamilton, in an ironically, said over the radio, "Wow, what a thing. Is he okay? Did he get hurt? Did he crash? Is everything all right with him?" All that stuff. And the friendship between the two, which was already shaky and was going to shake until it fell, as we know, in that year of 2014, had another crack in Monaco. In the middle of the ground effect era, the first ground effect era, not the current one, back in the late 70s, early 80s, the FIA, realizing that the speed of the cars was getting out of control and the circuits couldn't handle it, decided to issue a technical directive setting a minimum height to try to reduce the downforce. A less slow car with ground effects equals less aerodynamic pressure. But then at Brabham, Gordon Murray cleverly thought, cool, they will measure the minimum height, but that only applies to the car when it's stationary. How are they going to measure the minimum height on the track in motion? And the South African engineer, one of the greatest minds in the history of Formula One, began to ponder, I need to create a mechanism that lowers when I want and raises later when it's time. He then designed the Brabham BT49C with soft springs and shock absorbers filled with fluids, water, and hydraulic fluid at all four corners of the car. Fluids, as you might know, cannot be compressed, unlike air, for example, which you can compress with a syringe. Fluid doesn't work like that. And then at high speed, the aerodynamic pressure would push the car down and the fluid would exit the shock absorber, lowering the car onto the springs. But then when this force ended during the deceleration lap after the race, or qualifying without all the downforce, the fluid would return to the shock absorbers and the car would rise. When it came time for inspection, the car was at the regulatory height. And then, to divert the FI's attention throughout the year, Gordon created a useless mechanism, full of wires, just so the technical delegates would be puzzled trying to figure out what it was for. It was an aluminum box at the back of the car, full of wires that served absolutely no purpose. But the big thing in Formula One is the secret. After a masterful victory by Nelson Piquet in Argentina, the other teams quickly realized what was happening and copied it. But it served some purpose and was, of course, a trick against the regulations. At the 1975 Swedish Grand Prix, Robin Herd, one of the partners of March, noticed an opportunity while walking along the pit wall. You know those boards they put out for the driver to read? Position 1 plus so many seconds, and so on. Nowadays, less and less. Well, back then, with radio communication still in its infancy in Formula One, that was basically how communication was done. And during practice, Herd put a board out and noticed that it somehow affected the photoelectric cell of the timing system. The board basically somehow caused some kind of reflection that interrupted the beam and then sent a confusing signal to the stopwatch. The result? The only pole position for Vittorio Brambilla, a March driver, and he confirmed this in an interview many years later, saying, "When I saw that Vittorio was about 50 meters from the finish line, I passed the board in front of the sensor and pole position." At the 1959 United States Grand Prix, a driver you might not know, Harry Schell, used a trick that didn't require the technology of Vittorio Brambilla's pruning in '75. He basically took a shortcut. At that time, it's good to remember, there weren't as many photographers as there are today, and almost no television cameras. And then what did he do? Knowing the track very well and seeing that no car was coming behind, he took advantage of the moment during qualifying and cut 2 corners, making a time 2 seconds faster than his best mark. 2 seconds faster? You might ask me. Yes, 2 seconds faster at that time was a normal variation, like, I don't know, 2/10 today. That's because many people like to think that Formula One was super competitive at that time. This happened in December of '59, the only time Formula One went through Sebring in Florida. And with that time, he managed to place his Cooper Climax in 3rd on the grid, behind Sterling Moss and Jack Brabham. In the race, perhaps due to karma, he retired. Transmission problems. Don't think that result manipulation is a modern thing because of betting houses in sports and so on. Because at the Tripoli Grand Prix in Libya in 1933, in a pre-Formula One era, a scandal, which was only discovered much later, occurred. The person who recounted this in his book several years later was none other than Alfred Neubauer, the boss of the Mercedes team in the pre-Formula One era, the time of the Grand Prix. The story was basically as follows. A very wealthy local fan promised 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙤𝙀, the driver, a huge sum of money if he won the race. The driver then thought, the best way to get my hands on that money is to make a deal with the Russians, as 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧 would say. Varzi then approaches Tazio Nuvolari, one of the top drivers at the time, and says, split the money with me and let me win. Nuvolari thinks the best way for us to get the money from this unsuspecting rich guy is to make a deal with two others, because then there's no risk of someone else coming from the outside and winning. Obviously, these four were the main contenders for victory. It would be as if today Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, and George Russell agreed on the outcome of a race. Nuvolari then approaches Bakunin, Borzacchini, and Giuseppe Campari and tells them the same thing. Let's split this money among the four of us and agree that Varzi will win the race. Deal? In the race, Campari was leading until suddenly he had an engine failure. With 2 laps to go, Varzi was in third place, behind Nuvolari and Borzacchini. Borzacchini loses control and crashes, you know how it is. But Nuvolari continued in the lead with Varzi in second. And then on the final straight, with the finish line in sight, Nuvolari has to retire, out of fuel. Victory for Paquetá, victory for 𝘾𝙤𝙥𝙮𝙧𝙞𝙤 at the Tripoli Grand Prix in 1933. Can you believe it? We just don't know if the wealthy man actually paid. Did you like these tricks? Do you remember any others? I admit that this time I had to dig deep into research, going back to 1933 to find this story. This was then another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like. It's free. It costs nothing and helps the channel a lot. Break it for me. Break it for us. And don't forget to leave us your hype and even a little comment. Tell us if you remember any other tricks. Tell us the city you're watching from. And if you don't want to share any of those things, just leave a little emoji. The algorithm loves this kind of thing. It knows you're engaged with the content and then keeps distributing us, sharing our stories across the internet. That's how we've been growing rapidly towards 300,000 subscribers. I'm counting on you. This relationship only works if there's someone out there watching, because there's a crazy person here talking alone. To not miss anything we do here, we have notification channels, Instagram, Telegram, and also WhatsApp. You can join. Link down below in the description and start receiving an automatic message as soon as I publish each of these contents. Our social media links are also scrolling down here. Link also down below in the description. There's content all the time. Deal? See you in the next video. Thanks, and a big hug.